Hello, everyone. Welcome to the February 12th SIG PM meeting. This is a recorded meeting that will be available on YouTube, so be aware of that and make sure to adhere to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. That said, we have Cheryl Hung here today to chat a little bit about the CNCF end user community. So Cheryl, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Cheryl. I'm the Director of Ecosystem at the CNCF, and I'm focusing on the end user community, which is the 75 companies or so that make up the CNCF, specifically CNCF end user community, but also end users more generally, whether they're a member of the CNCF or not. So I've been planning some 2019 changes for what I'd like to see on behalf of the end user community. And this comes from about 45 interviews that I did with organizations, end user organizations during KubeCon Seattle. And in particular, there's a new process that I'd like to encourage SIG PM, the Kubernetes SIG PM, to adapt. And the goal of this would be to get SIG PM and end users to communicate in a discussion forum style at least once a quarter. So this is not just for SIG PM, these are all the CNCF projects and other SIGs as they are interested. And the reason that I'm making this change is that the current status, the current format where SIG PM and forum and the end users communicate is usually through an update, like a presentation. And I don't think this is the most useful way for the end users and SIG PM to communicate. So what I'm proposing is that once a quarter, there will be an online Zoom meeting where members of the end user community are invited, and this Kubernetes SIG PM group will set the discussion topics and set the agenda for what is to be discussed. So this could be, please give us
Sure. The only person who doesn't hear Cheryl now.
Cheryl cut out for me as well.
Same.
Yep. Right. I can pin Cheryl separately. Now we can move to the different topic and discuss the end user stuff later after Cheryl will pop up again.
Yeah, I just pinged her. Let's move on in the interim. All right, next one looks like you, Ihor, about the SIG PM charter.
Not so many updates from me right now, but hopefully we'll have enough items to discuss in 2 weeks at our regular meeting. So currently I'm working on drafting the SIG PM charter. After the basic skeleton and all the basic stuff will be there, I'll share that publicly with the group, and we'll have a chance to discuss it. Hopefully, we'd like to have the new charter merged in the next few weeks, ideally by the end of month. And the basic idea about the new charter is that the entire community changed significantly, like the entire Kubernetes community changed significantly since the Kubernetes SIG PM was established more than 2 years ago. And that was actually that we highlighted together with Steven at our KubeCon deep dive and intro session. So our charter currently is outdated. It reflects so many action items that I expected from our group that are not valid anymore because they're covered by different groups. For example, SIG architecture, SIG release, SIG contributor experience that didn't exist at the point of time when Kubernetes SIG PM was established. And at the same time, we also have some new responsibilities, including caps, including collaboration with the end users that should be reflected in the new charter. So please stay tuned. We'll have enough topics to discuss in 2 weeks about the new charter.
Cool. So I see we have Cheryl back. I want to see if your internet's a little bit better this time around.
Hey, sorry about that. Hoping this sticks around. So looking at the notes, I think you've captured pretty much everything that I wanted anyway. So my proposal to you, if you are willing to try out this new discussion forum format.
I mean, yeah, I think that's
SIG PM to trial. Sorry, can you hear me?
Oh no, keep going. Yeah.
Okay, is to trial this probably on March 14th, so 1 month from now.
So is it possible that we do a different date? I'll be speaking at a conference for March 14th personally.
Yeah, we can start a new date. I think if I can get these forums up and running, then I would want to do it maybe every Thursday or every couple of Thursdays.
Okay. So let's take it offline just so we don't yeah, we can bang around sometimes. Yeah.
But give me your thoughts on whether this sounds feasible, if this sounds like something that would be useful for you.
Yeah, so I think overall we did the SIG PM survey last year and presented that to Ihor presented that to the end user community. So I think that was like useful overall, but I think that really the goal of the end user community is to drive as much of that conversation around how people are utilizing Kubernetes and bring that back into something that's actionable for the community. So I think a forum is definitely better suited to that. So I'm fully on board.
Yeah, I second it. So last year we had two sessions, as Steven mentioned. Like we had one session in Q3, Q4, and another one in Q1, Q2, where SIG PM presented to the end user community. Hopefully they were useful, but we haven't had enough discussion style there. So it was mostly the presentation from SIG PM to the end users. This time I'd like us to see more face-to-face conversations, like online face-to-face conversations with the end users, and where we'll be able to share our thoughts where Kubernetes is moving to, and where they will be able to share their thoughts, what they would like to see us doing for them.
Sounds great. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
Craig, Bill, Kevin?
Okay.
No, I think that sounds like a good idea.
Yep. The only thing that I'd like to raise, probably not now, but at the forum, is there any way how end users can be more active in the community itself, in the Kubernetes community itself? I mean, how they may have more impact on our roadmap, how they may have more impact on what we are doing, what the community does with the Kubernetes features, for example, and so. So the question I'm asking this question because the CNCF end user community is mostly discussing these items within the end user community itself, not only with the Kubernetes community. So, is there any way how we can engage the end users to be more active in the public technology community?
I'm definitely keen to get end users to contribute and be a more active part of the community. I think it's intimidating for a lot of end users who don't know anybody to get involved. So another long-term goal of setting up these forums is so that they get to know people and users get to know people in the community, and that way get more naturally drawn into the areas that will be of interest to them. But I do think that I would like Kubernetes and the other projects to come to these meetings with some thoughts about what they want from end users as well. And then hopefully by having the discussion, then you can take that further after these forums. But yeah, I'm really keen to make sure that end users and the projects engage as much as possible. So this is just a first step. If this is a success, then I'll continue to build on programs that make sure that end users and projects interact more often.
Yep, sounds great. Thank you.
I think it makes sense to make places that are inviting and sort of open for the end user community to sort of give feedback. But are there also ways that we can go where they are, as opposed to expecting them to do something new and unfamiliar to them? And I think that it's something I would like to all of us to figure out how to do is how do we get engaged in the forums in which they're already discussing issues, and then we can either bring things back into the community or encourage the right folks to participate in the existing SIG and working group kind of forums.
I will be very happy for you to come and
I'm sorry, Cheryl, you cut off for a minute there.
Sorry, yeah, I think that's a very good idea. I want to, right now the end user community is, it has a couple of places where it gets together to discuss, but it's only really kicked off recently, like end user SIGs in the last few weeks. I'm also planning a end user summit at KubeCon as a pre-event to KubeCon, but I think it might be, do you have suggestions for other places that you might want to engage?
You know, I don't. I was sort of asking that of the group. You know, I try to participate in my company's engagements with our customers using our stuff and get feedback that way. I also, you know, watch Twitter and read blogs and so forth, but I don't have a sort of systematic way of engaging in the upstream community, end user community, and that's what I would love to help build.
Yeah, so I think to Craig's point, you know, the end user community is meant to be this, you know, this additional benefit, right? You've gained membership and you get these additional benefits, and we want to make sure that, you know, the benefits for them bringing information back into the community. Like we may not know all of the forums that they converse at. Simply because the whole idea is it's supposed to be kind of like opt-in membership situation. So yeah, I think we're definitely curious in hearing more about that, and the forums that we can participate in are just based on the structure of the CNCF membership. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm very happy to try and keep working together on different ways to encourage that. From the end user's point of view, it is something that end users typically want to talk to each other more than they want to talk to projects. So I want to stress that I think this is something that will take a bit of effort on your part to make sure you're reaching out to end users. Otherwise, naturally, people form into communities with other people like themselves. In this case, this means other end users, like banks want to talk to banks, healthcare providers want to talk to healthcare providers. So I think it's something that we will continue to iterate on. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like this all sounds great. I'm excited, excited to get more plugged in with them.
Yeah, me too. So we can follow up to figure out the exact date or time that would work best for people. And then you can send me some discussion topics, like an agenda, and I'll publicize that out to the end users and try and get as many of them to come and join that meeting as I can. Does that sound like it would work for you?
That sounds great to me. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. In that case, I'm going to have to drop off if that's okay. I'll leave you to the rest of your meeting.
All right, take
Thank
it
you,
easy,
Cheryl.
Cheryl.
Cheers, thank you, bye.
All right, so for those joining, Ihor, prior to Cheryl coming back, Ihor had mentioned that we plan to work on a revised charter for SIG PM. It's overdue at this point now that we've kind of as a community synced on a new charter format. So that will be coming within, by the end of February. We're gonna sync internally around the chairs and then kick the charter out for feedback. So next step, I'm not sure exactly who suggested this, but it's a great idea, and I think we should do it. We have an opportunity now that there has been increased chatter around KEPs to really talk about the process, to really talk about what we can do to be improving the process. That said, the idea was to have something like a KEPs office hour on the alternating weeks that we don't have the actual SIG PM meeting. So generally feedback has been positive about wanting to do something like that, but I want to take it to the people in the room too to kind of give their feedback.
Personally, I would love to sit on both sides of that to help other people with their KEPs and also get some assistance with mine. So I'm supportive.
Yeah, so I'm curious what the format will end up being, whether it's a few people sitting in a room talking about how to shape KEPs, or if we should be finding a way to bring KEP reviewers into the process as well. So if there are, there's specific technical content that people want to go over or help, restructure, whether it's, whether it's something that's moving from, provisional into an implementable state, and, how to kind of like bridge the gap between those things. Or something that has been, I haven't seen a KEP specifically be moved to like deferred or rejected states, but if they were to be, discussing how that decision could either be reversed or further discussed, and what kind of feedback would be required to get that done. So yeah, I will shut up for a second if people have feedback.
Personally, I think that KEP office hours are a bit premature. Like, we're in the middle of a transition of what the KEP format is and how all of that is going to work, specifically how transitions for KEPs are going to work or should work, what are the graduation criteria. These are all like important questions that first need a place in the actual process to discuss. So I feel like one challenge here, given that a KEP is today only just a template in GitHub, there's not really a real place where you can discuss what it would mean to promote a KEP without just writing more text that is provably hard for the community to manage. So I think that all of these discussions are maybe a release ahead of where they should be. I mean, there definitely needs to be more work explaining what the KEP process is and how to make use of it. But I would feel not great about telling people or ramping people up on what KEPs used to be when they're just about to change in terms of their format, and actually have a opportunity now to talk about what are, concrete requirements for graduation criteria, what are concrete requirements for being included into the release tracking process.
So do you think that this would perhaps be a valuable forum for discussing those types of changes, or do you think that we should kind of go internally and find and find a way to kind of expound on the documentation
I think
before doing
the
that?
forum would be fine. It's just there's no actual place to realize any of the proposed changes. So until that is the case, I mean, we would be adding to a laundry list of action items without an ability to actually realize them. Certainly at the current scale of the project. So I guess that's kind of, I feel like if you are interested in the planning process, a better place to get involved is the aspects of the planning that are interesting to you, whether it's the release process or the API review process. But there are these kind of like large bottlenecks that we have today that are already unwieldy for the project. They kind of are looking for kind of strategic contributions today to help us manage the processes we have, such as they are, while we're trying to get the tooling and the process itself automatable such that we can have more fruitful discussions. I guess I personally would, I don't know how fruitful they would be until there's a place to actually realize the changes proposed, any changes proposed. I don't know what you would do with them. That's not to say that I don't like, software therapy sessions, but I assume we all have like, day jobs that we need to get to.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if having an additional meeting is the opportunity to kind of drive down some of that discussion. I know that we have discussions around the API review process, and we have things that are continually changing around the release process, including, I think one of the bigger ones was the fact that, KEPs became a requirement for enhancements this time around. And I will admit that, so Caleb out of the gate said, like, this is going to be bumpy. This is going to be like very bumpy before we started, and we were like, we're gonna try. We're gonna see what happens. And for sure, it was bumpy. I think it was bumpy and confusing for a lot of people. That said, we were considering doing a kind of an enhancements freeze retro. What happened? What people weren't happy with? A lot of it was around we've gotten to a point where we realize and understand the changes that we want to make to the code, and not so much how to document them and bring them into the process, right? So there may have been existing design proposals or an existing KEP that was in a provisional state that not everyone that needed to be aware was aware that it was moving forward for the 1.14 release cycle. So there was definitely a lot of confusion around it. I think that some of the improvements, we recently merged a revised KEP template that is, it's moving from strictly template to instructional, and I think that we need to abstract some of those instructions out into the repo. But it does tackle, and let me link it. It does tackle some of the questions that were asked around the release process, definitely closer to the enhancements freeze process. So general thoughts on having a enhancements freeze retro.
I feel great about having the retro. I think that would be great to figure out what the learnings were there from the attempt to make the KEPs mandatory for releasing. But I would be pretty hesitant to have a recurring meeting at this point.
Okay.
That's not to say that it's not never going to happen. Just that if it could wait a month or two, that would probably be for the best.
Okay. I mean, I think that we all have more than enough meetings on our schedule, so I'm pushing it back a little bit is not a concern. Let's see. yeah, so I think I want to grab a few of the stakeholders and chat with them offline, so definitely getting the release leads and, the release leads in the loop and the enhancements team in the loop on that, and finding a time to schedule that, I think would be valuable. So I'll take that as an action item. All right, so overall we did a SIG PM update on the community call last week, I believe. And some of the highlights were we mentioned, yes, KEPs have become a requirement for the release process. We're going to keep driving down the difficulties around that and make sure it's an easy process for people to access. We're going to continue working on the KEP meta implementation, essentially, making sure, starting to get to the point where we can start introducing these, this wonderful tooling that Caleb has been working on. And making sure that people actually understand what the process is so that that tooling can be successful. And then kind of, forward looking, I'd like to see people start tackling migrating design proposals into KEPs. I think that's a little ways down the road. But one of the things that we were noticing is that, there is a fair amount of burden on the people who are in owners files within the KEP folders to actually be able to turn these things around, especially when, a new requirement has popped up, right? So the requirement of like making sure that KEPs are implementable before you work on a release cycle was new to people. So, that being able to bring KEPs into that state while managing anything else that you have to manage, it sounds like was difficult for people. So one of the suggestions I made was to let's start bolstering the reviewers and approvers within each of the individual SIGs, right? So I'm sure there are more people who are interested in overall architectural review, and that's maybe a topic of discussion for SIG architecture specifically. But from within each of the SIGs, we can. I'm sure there are more than just the SIG chairs and technical leads that are capable of doing KEP reviews and approvals. So I'd like to jumpstart getting SIGs to bolster those owner files. We also need to start looking at closing out the non-Kubernetes enhancement issues. So, a lot of the burden for the enhancements team is around figuring out what is actually going in the release, if it's actually updated, if the KEPs are attached, if it has a test plan, if it has decent graduation criteria and docs and et cetera. So the part of the confusion there is that a lot of the things that are tracked within the enhancements repo are not Kubernetes related. And yeah, at the end of the day, the release team does not care about those things, right? Outside of how they may affect in-tree Kubernetes code or processes. So we need to start looking at cleaning up that repo. I'd probably start to look at doing that towards the end of the release cycle.
I would be careful about that. So I don't think there's anything about the KEP process that precludes them addressing enhancements that are proposed outside of Kubernetes. That's a separate issue to how the KEP process connects to the enhancements tracking process for the release team specifically. But I think that these are two separate issues should guide, at least I believe, I have not heard an argument that they are the same issue. So until such an argument, I guess, materializes, I think we should be careful about saying that the KEP process is only for things that are targeting Kubernetes.
Oh no, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is that the enhancement tracking issues, the only one who really cares about those are the ones that are landing for Kubernetes. So overall, the one of the bigger confusions was like, well, I have something that I'm doing out of tree. Why do I have to have a KEP that's in implementable status for my out of tree work by the deadlines that are being set for the 1.14 release cycle? And the answer is you don't. right?
Well,
So like,
perhaps. I think we also have challenges in the release messaging about having a consistent voice. And so there are things, that should be out of Kubernetes, like KubeADM or Client Go, that are sponsored projects that, have, changes that you could talk about in the release notes, but that is not targeted against Kubernetes. But I think that's what I'm trying to say, that we have to think about these as two, at least I try to think about them as two separate problems that are still related. And that connection, how to tie those two problems together is part of the, the key work that a group like this does, is having that make sense.
Right, for sure. So there's also a SIG release issue that's open right now about discussing like how we tackle things that are out of tree, but we want visibility for, right? So there are things that are kind of in tree or near tree, like as providers start to work on detangling their code, like detangling the out of tree, the cloud provider code from in tree Kubernetes. There are things where SIGs are interested in providing updates of things that happened within the release cycle, right, that are currently landing in the changelog. And I don't think that that's the appropriate place for them, simply because like the changelog should be changelog for things that are happening strictly in that repo. But the fact of the matter is, like, we don't have a better presentation mechanism, or we haven't. So that's something that could be dreamed up, and that that information could be cast off there. But there are a lot of so there are things that are, one of the things that came up was moving cloud providers out of tree, and then something else that came up was CSI, right? CSI is developed out of tree, right? And they were like the need to have these requirements for our development process, especially because our development process doesn't exactly sync up with the Kubernetes timeline, the Kubernetes timeline. It's difficult, or it's hard to approach. So I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I know there's a middle ground between things that are definitely Kubernetes, things that are close to Kubernetes, like the KubeADMs, the client goes, the cloud provider things, and then there's stuff that's strictly out of tree, right? You're developing it on some repo, and yes, you should file a KEP about the things that you're doing, but that KEP doesn't have the same scrutiny that something might if it's going into Kubernetes. Sorry if that was kind of rambly, but.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm skeptical as to the scrutiny levels. I mean, so I guess for context, I work at Google, and there is not that, at least the things that keep me up at night. And I imagine if you work at a large provider or have a large customer base of any kind, that whether the changes landed in Kubernetes or in Istio or in some Knative project means not all that much to you as an operator. Your blast radius is similar no matter where the changes come from. So I think it is nice to think, and certainly kind of like the architectural layers work that Brian led last year I guess assumes that we can minimize the problem to things that are just within some set of organizations. But I feel like from the end user's point of view, that we need to have a mechanism for providing eyes on all of this stuff. Most of people, I think nowadays, are shipping Kubernetes and their friends. And so we need to have eyes on the and friends part as well, because it all impacts the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm totally in agreement there. What I think what it was coming down to is there's a point in the release cycle where we're like, hey, we need release notes. We need to know what's going on in the changelog and different things like that. And certain SIGs are like, we have no updates for Kubernetes, right? But there's still maybe stuff, as you said, the end friends part, right? Maybe stuff that they want to showcase, and I don't think that that's the appropriate forum. And then from so that's release process side. But then from the KEP side, like, yes, I think there should be a known level of scrutiny that everything is put under if you're going to make a change to something within the project. Do we have all of the process around it yet? Like, no, not yet. Of course not. But it needs to be that. I agree that there should be scrutiny across the entire project, right? Figuring out how to strike that balance so that people are not necessarily beholden to the release cycle, right? Is what we need to look at.
Yeah, not for this group, but I think that the only real way of solving that problem is to increase the speed of the releases. That requires, of course, increasing the confidence in individual releases. So it's all like program process problem. And this has always been my caution for my association here in terms of Kubernetes planning, is to not create more use cases beyond your ability to manage the use cases, because it ends up creating a bunch of challenges downstream, because there's just no one has heads up. So, thinking carefully about how to roll out process changes as if they were software changes, because the stakeholders and impacts are fairly similar with process versus code. There's not that much distinction if you think about it, or if you've had to be the therapist in someone's software therapy session.
No, that's completely fair. Yeah, I think it's not something that will be strictly solved here. This is a project-wide concern, so I'm curious to see where we take it. We as in the project, not we as in SIG PM, just for the recording's sake. Any other thoughts on that?
Nothing to it at the moment.
All right. Well, if no one has anything to say, I think that we can get a few minutes of our schedule back. One more time around the block. Is anyone interested in discussing something specifically?
I mean, not discussing anything, but just that people, like software previews. The great thing about having tooling to support the process is that problems like how to ensure that a KEP is implementable before adding it to the release tracking can become really simple. So here's a sketch of how that could work. Unfortunately, software always takes longer to deliver than you would like. But these are problems that we have been thinking about, for years now, and are close to being able to be resolvable. It's not there's not a final state there, but there's a place you can have a conversation about how to do things like promote a KEP to the various stages of its life cycle. And these questions become much easier to answer once there's a place for it.
Yeah, for sure. So so anyone who hasn't seen that repo before, like, this is the tool that we will be using to kind of move KEPs through the stages, make sure that they're well formed and presentable. So this tool Caleb has been working on for quite some time. I need to step into that world and start working on the conversion code. But yeah, take a look at Caleb amiles/KEPs on GitHub.
I'm going to try to make some time to look at it.
Yeah, it's very much still very rough. It's close to being able to demo what, at least as we have today, what stages a KEP should go through in its life cycle. And then it'll be much easier to talk and reason about, and to have people come in and help to improve these sections. But right now it's like, you know, you can't really entertain people in your house when it's still beams. And we've got beams right here. There's a roof, so at least, you know, the plywood's no longer getting soaked, so that's nice.
Alrighty, so I'll
The
put.
analogy. Sorry.
Sorry, go for it, Craig.
I was just saying I like the analogy.
So I'll put links for all of this stuff up in the agenda, so you can take a look at that repo. You can take a look at the SIG PM update, and so on and so forth. Thank you everyone for showing up. I'm gonna cut the recording and say goodbye. Take it easy.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.